Hi Nick, thank you so much for being here. Super excited. I think that we've chatted, we've connected over LinkedIn and had this really interesting conversation. And afterwards, we've met again at the Dreyfus Conscious Fashion event. And for me,
Yeah.
it was clear I must need to get this guy on our Amoeba Meets format because I mean you have such an incredible experience in what you're building. So yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks very much. Lovely introduction. No, I really appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Maybe
love what you're doing as well.
No, thank you. Maybe you can give some background, just for the viewers on what you've done. I mean, you have such an incredible experience, and I think really this journey from going, from a buying and also product development position and these like very established companies to actually then becoming a founder yourself of a fashion brand, I think is super inspirational. Also to myself being a founder. So yeah, maybe you can just give a quick intro about yourself and talk a little bit about your journey.
Thanks very much. I'll try and give you the succinct version. Yeah. So I um, studied fashion at Leeds a long time ago. And then I was a textile agent for a bit. And then I worked at Debenhams for a while on their sort of trainee buyer scheme. And then I joined a company called Charles Tyrwhitt at quite a small stage. They were probably turning over 3, 4 million at the time. And then I was there a long time. So I was there for 15, 16 years. So grew with them and had various roles, buying director, buying and merchandiser director. But at the end, my last 4 or 5 years there, I was brand stroke design director. So I was looking after but both the sourcing of the product, the design of the product, and then the execution of the product in terms of customer presentation. Then I went to Moss Bros. I was there for 4 or 5 years. So again, I was buying and merchandising director there for a little while, but mostly buying and brand director. So again, looking after design development of product and then sourcing and then presentation of that product in store and online. And then in 2021 launched Neem. And then since then I've been working hard at trying to grow a startup in a middle-aged way, as well as doing a little bit of consulting on the side, to ensure that I keep the financial winds blowing.
No, it's super exciting. I think there's the amount of people that I meet that are working in the fashion industry, be it buying positions or even designers that say, okay, ultimately they have this goal to actually start something on their own and go out and start their own brand. I think it's quite high. How did you end up, making that decision? I mean, you've been in all these very senior leadership positions in the fashion industry, and then you actually go out and said, you know what, now is the right time. And as you say, also at not the young founder age, and but actually, I mean, you're still young, but at an age where you leverage the experience.
I think anyone who's sort of dreaming of doing it, just think carefully. So anyone listening and watching and thinking of doing it themselves, it is a very hard thing to do. But I'd always had that entrepreneurial spirit in me. 2006, 2007, I started up an organic shirt brand called Black Ants. Black Ants are used as a natural pesticides in the growth of organic cotton. They kill the red ants. So I'd always dabbled with it, but because of growing in the sort of corporate ladder, and then also in turning left on a plane was quite attractive,
Mm.
and then traveling. I was very lucky to travel the world to factories in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, Peru, Romania, Egypt, Morocco, and elsewhere. So I just got caught in growing businesses, both Charles Tyrwhitt and then Moss Bros. Uh, but I came to the conclusion that in order to create something really clean and ecologically sound, it had to be hard coded from day one. So I was seeing difficulties, but both at a larger level, sort of 150 million to 200 million at Moss Bros, and then 250 million upwards at Charles Tyrwhitt. And then also when I was consulting or looking at smaller businesses up to 10 million, if you're not hard coding it from day one, it's very difficult to make the right choices in terms of reduction of waste, reduction of CO2 impact, or reduction of water usage without hard coding it into the brand from day one. So rather foolishly or naively, that's what we set out to do really was to create a low waste brand that was circular, and measure the environmental impact of the product right back to source, so inclusive of all scope 3, and then ensure that we could deal with the product at end of life. So that was our aim, low waste, circular, and low carbon. And I felt that in order to do that, it was better to sort of build it from day one, which we set out to do, and then we launched in 2021.
No, I think it's a really interesting thing because there's certainly a hype going on in the industry where a lot of established brands think about, okay, but now let's also try to be circular, or let's also try to be sustainable. But actually what they are trying to do is they're building upon, you know, a legacy within their operation. There's, at some point, there's also the question from my end, coming in from the supply chain and the operation side of, okay, to what extent, similar to what you say, can you actually now turn around the entire existing operation to actually be truly sustainable, or actually to cut waste, or how much do you actually need to kind of go back to say, okay, let's really start from scratch and rebuild that. So I think really embedding it not just in the brand DNA, what is customer facing, but actually on the real operation side is probably essential to really get it to that level of, okay, taking a step back, starting from scratch. How does it actually work? What does circularity actually really mean on the fabric side, on the design side, on the obviously then the supply chain side? How did you then think about that when you really went out of Moss Bros and you said, okay, I want to do that. I want to start Neiman and really have that in mind. What was you have this blank paper and you just start from scratch. How did you go about that?
Well, first point is that it had been something that had been digging at me for years. As I'd, um, you know, thankfully and unfortunately traveled the world to factories, what I was seeing, both at factory level and then at graduate intake level, was that there was less, throughout from probably 2004-5 right up until 2020. I was seeing less interest in where the product was made, how it was made, and the transparency of the product right back to source, including farm or fiber. So whilst there were a few brands emerging that were creating products with total transparency, I guess Everlane would have been the really good example. I was noticing that graduates just didn't have the same interest. They were very good at the style, and then concurrent to that, when we were faced with margin pressures, we would often just cut out processes or introduce more man-made fiber. So we'd go from wool to polywool. We'd go from cotton to a non-iron cotton with a resin on it to make it more customer friendly, but less potentially durable, and then also less friendly post consumer use. So I started studying this quite carefully during the pandemic. So it was in the pandemic really, and that we all had a bit more time on our hands, didn't we? Albeit I was pretty busy because there was a lot of furloughed staff in pandemic. So I felt that could we create a product that was made from recycled materials, as stylish as non-recycled, as durable as non-recycled, and then at end of life, we build a supply chain that deals with that product. And then alongside that, we understand what the environmental impact is of that product. So we run life cycle assessments. So we know how much better the recycled product is, and we have to keep measuring that. And that is a challenge. But you mentioned the larger businesses. My sense of larger businesses is that the ecological choice is always going to be, unfortunately, at the moment, more expensive and
Yeah.
more difficult. Over time, that is changing. It's becoming less expensive and it's becoming simpler. So in larger businesses, I think the easier way of doing it is just to create, which people do, capsule collections on a lower margin, drive a higher average order value, and then learn from that with regards to customer interest and purchasing interest as well, of course, and then introduce some of those learnings into the main collection. But from a Neem perspective, it was just about being as pure as we could from day one, and then improving on that as you go.
I really like what you just mentioned for the larger brands as well, because I think they're, you know, obviously, you know, Simon Platz quite well, and you know, he made the statement which I really like, this. It's no matter where you are on this journey towards sustainability, or you know, really trying to make your supply chain and your brand more sustainable. There's this element of, it's not about perfection from day one. It's also about, okay, how can you iterate and do things in a better way. I think the margin pressure and the cost pressure that you face as a larger company, and also the incentives that you probably have are different ones than compared to a brand like Neem, where we actually say, okay, from the beginning, this is a very purpose-driven brand, and you actually, you know, build it up not just on the branding side, but actually really on the operation side to be purpose-driven. And I think I might have mentioned this to you. My wife is a textile supplier. You know, she's originally from Taiwan and based in Taiwan. And what ended up happening is there was this big trend of, yeah, we all, you know, from her customers, we want recycled polyester. And then they went out and they did a lot with recycled polyester. They presented it to the brands, and the brands said, yeah, but actually the costs are too high. No, 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 let's actually go back to normal poly. And it's like, it's really where you can see, okay, there is an incentive at the beginning, but once they realize the cost, very quickly you actually go back to margin and the
Yeah,
cost structure.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think because we work in fashion, we like fads, we like the new thing, we like to innovate. We like, we're not um, by virtue of working in the industry, we want to do something new and work on a new area. So therefore, you know, in that example, recycled polyester seems like the exciting new thing. Let's rush off and do it. And then you realize at a later point, the logical person in the business says, well, hold on, this is going to really destroy our profits or our at least our margin to start with. Um, so I think it's important to know why you're in it. You know, understand why are you in it. What are you doing within it? So you know, we're in it to create, you know, a product that's, you know, low waste, clean, and we can deal with the waste post consumer purchase. And then we're in it also just to create stylish, elegant, casual menswear. You know, we're not trying to, you know, we can't create disruptive systems yet because we just haven't got the finance and the infrastructure and the size. But at the moment, we just want to disrupt. And every time we sell a product, we believe that we're stealing that from someone that might be selling something that's not made with recycled or doesn't run a take back scheme or doesn't trace right back to farm. And therefore, the customer's learning a little bit more about what they're buying each day. And then our repeat purchase rate goes up because we're educating them on the issues of the industry and making them feel good about their purchase.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to understand why you're in it and what you're doing within it.
Absolutely. I think now at the same time, Neem is obviously also a business. So how do you make sure to balance? Because I think there's you know, also from the consumer side, and this is just what I've been thinking about. Isn't circularity isn't inherently against the interests of a fashion brand in terms of, okay, actually, you know, actually, I do want to launch more products into the market, and because I need to keep selling more. So the longer lasting my garments are, and you know, the more circular I am as a brand, do I actually now distort the opportunity of being able to sell more? And as a brand, I should, on the pure hardcore financial side, I should really optimize for, you know, products that are not long lasting, so that I can keep selling more to consumers. How do you merge that? Is it like merging
Built
purpose and
in,
profit?
yeah, I suppose built-in obsolescence it was only sort of invented in the 20s, 30s, wasn't it, by type manufacturers. I think, look, I'm not suggesting degrowth at this point. Let's talk about degrowth in 5 or 6 years, because I think geopolitically there's a lot to contend with at the moment, and there's an anti-green rhetoric that is certainly growing. So I think first and foremost we need to create a product that is made with, you know, either products that you can trace to farm or with recycled materials that we then take back, and then we deal and manage that waste either by recycling, reselling, or downcycling. uh, the product has to be stylish, it has to be elegant, and of course it's still new product, and there's still some energy consumed within the manufacturing of the product. We're not perfect in that. Perfection in fashion probably is degrowth, um, and I'm not suggesting that at this point. I'm suggesting just create systems within the industry that are that are cleaner, more thoughtful, more considered. Educate the consumer on that, but both on what's happening elsewhere in other retailers, and you can be as macro and as simple as that, or as detailed or as an intellectual as you want, depending on who you're talking to and in which environment. And in a store you can have a much deeper conversation because someone's there for 20-30 minutes with a clickbait sort of Instagram reel. You've got to be quite succinct. I think that we need to ensure that customers stay within our ecosystem. So if they bought, they like what they're buying, and then they're repeat purchasing. So our repeat purchase rate is high, and that's vital through good customer retention programs, good conversations with customers across all the channels, so they then just feel better about their purchase. And it's a bit like that feeling when you go camping. You often feel better about yourself if you go camping, don't you? You're out in the fresh air, and isn't this great? But you don't want to do it every weekend. Sometimes, unfortunately, you do want to go and stay in a nice hotel. And we need to sort of bridge that brand that is, well, I feel camping, and I feel better about my purchase, and I've been out in the fresh air, and isn't life great? I've been camping, and I bought from Neem, but it's also stylish and elegant, and it feels a bit 5-star at times.
No, I super resonate with that. I think on 2 points here. Number one, as an entrepreneur, again, the businesses that I've built, the mission behind it is actually the critical thing. I think you start a business, or probably the successful business, all started with a mission in mind. And once you started with a mission in mind, over time, you will actually build a successful business. Whereas if you go in and just trying to say, okay, let me capture a trend, or let me capture an opportunity and be super opportunistic about it, probably you're not going to build something that truly disrupts the market. And I think the other part of it is, and I can imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but as you build a fashion brand, you don't need to cater to every single person in the world, right? Like it's you have a subset of customers that actually really care, and unfortunately, as you say, also with the anti-green rhetoric, there are a lot of customers that might not actually care that much, or there are certain trends that are happening within the market, but there is a subset of core customers that actually truly care. And then you kind of zoom out and you look in the market, and probably there's a very big gap in the market for fashion brands such as Neem that can come in and actually really cater towards customers that inherently care about circularity, sustainability, and also still being stylish. I think I fall into that category personally. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is only one way to build a business, and that is one customer at a time, right? You've got to, and every customer that purchases, you've got to look after them carefully. And when we don't follow up with personal private emails and handwritten notes, they just don't respond as well. You need to look after each customer as carefully as to whether they've only bought a pair of socks or whether they've spent £450 on a multi-product order. But in terms of the target consumer, you're spot on. You've got to have a niche. So our niche is generally 40, 45 to 65-year-olds, that more baby boomery, Gen X, who feel a little bit guilty about the way they've been behaving in the last 20, 30 years. They often work in some sort of path to net zero. So that might be in energy, it might be in government, it might be in journalism, it might be in architecture, or it might just be that they work for a B Corp. Wearing Neem in that sort of 45 to 65-year-old age group is sort of a badge of honor for them. They feel better about their purchases, and they can talk about it over dinner. That, oh, I'm wearing Neem and I'm also working at Octopus. But 30% just are buying on style, and you know what, they don't care about net zero. They just like the style, the look, and the fact that it's targeted at a slightly older demographic.
Hmm.
And we purposely use older models and really focus on an older clientele for two reasons. Firstly, I'm at that age, so I just understand it more. But secondly, in the research that I did in 2020, before setting up the brand, my research was that actually that customer cares more about environmental impact than Gen Z because in the younger demographic, secondhand and resale, it really matters. But when it's new, and I'm going to a festival or a wedding or a date, or I need to buy something, the primary focus is I just want to look sexy and look good for that event. And therefore, your environmental beliefs are suddenly low down on the agenda, and what's top is I just need to look hot. Whereas the older demographic are less as self-aware. They've already built up a wardrobe, so when they are purchasing, it's a more considered and timeless purchase that needs often a bit more depth to it. And then for a subset of that demographic, uh, an area of depth is environmental impact.
It's super fascinating because I think there was this notion of okay, Gen Z really cares about sustainability, so now we need to become very sustainable, and for a lot of brands, and I think at the same time, obviously there's this aspect of propensity to spend and being able to actually spend money on clothing and as you've mentioned, there's a cost to circular and sustainable fashion. So for me it was always kind of striking where there was this yeah, really this tone in the industry where everyone said, yeah, in order to capture now the Gen Z, we need to become more sustainable because they really, really care. And it was almost communicated as if all these other generations don't care, whereas as you've just mentioned, probably the reality looks a little bit different.
Think so. Yeah, I think in that demographic, look, it's secondhand and resale, proven by Vinted and eBay and Investia at the top of the market. That there is an interest and that's the shift in the market. But I think for that generation, wellness, mental health, are bigger trends than sustainability. And let's be clear, you can't only lead with sustainability when it comes to a brand. You've got to lead with product or style or something else. We make elegantly casual clothes designed for work and weekend. But it's almost okay. There's layers of sustainability. There's tracing back to farm and running environmental footprints like ours. But then there's just, hey, we're using recycled polyester, as you were mentioning earlier. Um, but to an extent, saying you're sustainable is almost a bit like saying now that you're not a bully. People kind of expect it. We're almost at a point where you could run a sort of fake brand and see what happened, saying, "Look, we're not sustainable." You're like a Trump sort of, Joe Rogan type brand of right. We're not sustainable at all, and we're doing everything we can just to make product that you can afford, but we don't care about the impact. As a fun little test, you could see how that is, and there are brands doing that, but they're not leading with that as their message. Anyway, look, the point I'm making is that you need to lead with something other than sustainability. And then sustainability, the level of which you go to depends on the brand and where you are. And as I was saying earlier, in order to hard code it and be really deep, I felt it had to be done from day one, rather than trying to do it later.
Absolutely. I think that that there are two questions top of my mind. Number one, on this hard-coded identity, also on the operations side for Neem. I mean, I've seen some videos, on LinkedIn where you actually, shear a sheep by yourself, and like all these
Yeah.
crazy things. You're running around on a in the middle of the Midlands or somewhere. It's like
Yeah.
maybe you can elaborate a little bit. How deep do you actually go on the operations side? Because I find it super fascinating. It's just like,
Well, we have a rule that we only use recycled fibers, or fibers that are natural that we can trace right to farm. So if we can't trace it to the field, we don't buy it. Um, and that's getting harder as we grow. But getting and also wanting to offer a margin and a price that is attractive. So at the moment we're developing a product, a made in Britain product that we're trying to create within 200 miles. So we're going right to farm to 260 sheep. That there's six breeds of sheep, British breeds that have been bred together over the last 6-7 years. What's called hybrid vigor, and that has created a breed, or a crossbreed that creates a more lustrous, softer yarn that is closer to merino. Merino can't unfortunately be farmed in this country because it's just a bit too wet. We're using those a blend of that sheep, and then we're using that fiber, and then I was shearing the sheep last week, the Neem sheep, and then we're gonna make the product up in Nottingham, and then sell the product in October, November. And the reason we're doing it is to try and take people on a journey of how easy it is to make in Britain at a price, but also show how difficult it is. So and we're creating sort of various episodes of each process. Sheep shearing. The soil. We only work with the regenerative farms, mostly accredited land to market farms. And then we want to talk about, what does regenerative really mean? What impact, both positive and in terms of farming difficulty, does it mean? Um, but we want to take people on that journey, take on the process, the soil, the farm, the farmers, the shearing, the spinning, the knitting, the making, the packaging, the pricing, the selling, um, to show you, can something be made in Britain today that is fully traceable in a way that might have been made 100 years ago, but using technology to support that? So traceability technology, product passports, as well inside the product, and at the end of it, make a conclusion of, look, this is possible, and the prices can reduce, and we can serve a larger market because it's 260 sheep today, but there's no reason why it can't be 500 sheep, in another couple of years, and 1,000 sheep in 3 or 4 years, and then you're starting to scale that. But how difficult it is, but also how easy it is, because it's easy to just, which is sad, to almost get on a plane, go to Dhaka, um, go and see a few factories in Bangladesh, and then buy a product there, have it shipped in.
hmm.
It's easy. There's lots to select from, and can almost put a label in it, or you can even make blanks from Leicester, put a label in it, but it's not made in this country. So we just want to show how something can be made in this country, right from farm, to finished product, and then make some conclusions on how you could scale this in the future at a price that is affordable, not just for the few, but for the many.
It is. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of it because I'm really passionate, obviously, about manufacturing, supply chains, and actually seeing how a product is made, and actually seeing how a product can be made here in the UK. I think it's fascinating, and I think there's this element of, just as a consumer, when I think there's a much higher appreciation when you actually see all the work that goes into a product that you're buying, whether it's a fashion item or something else. And if you don't see that journey as a consumer, probably you also, at least for me personally, you don't value the product that you buy not as much if you don't actually see how many people are involved, how much work has been going on along every single step. And I think for me there was always this big appreciation for, if I can actually see how something is being made, there is a yeah there's a clear appreciation for, okay, there's a lot of hard work that is behind that product, and it's not just a thing that you can see hanging in the shop and you just buy it and it's like, okay, whatever, and one day I'm just gonna throw it away.
I hope so. I mean, it's a balance, isn't it? You want to consider the product as an asset, that it's something that has been, painfully produced, and you want to understand the layers of it. But you also want to look stylish, and unfortunately, there has been deflation in this industry for the last 30 plus years. And the introduction of man-made fibers over the last 30, 40 years has meant that products, don't need as much ironing. They're often, quite breathable. They wash well, so you can multi-wash them. Um, and, polyester is a wonder fiber. And if you look at the fiber usage, in this country or globally, in 1985, it was still dominated by cotton and wool.
Mm,
And then since then, it's now dominated by, polyester. Um,
mm.
so wool production has dropped off a cliff. So yeah, we also want to show that, yes, it's an asset. You need to look after it. You need to take care of it. So understanding each process, but also trying to ensure that a few people return to natural fibers, that are traceable to farm, or recycled fibers. But it's a challenge, isn't it? If we need gym kit, we rush in, we buy a pair of shorts, and we're not looking at the label. So you've got to, that's our issue, is that you've got to create product that is affordable, traceable, sexy, and lasts. And that's the daily challenge we try and provide each day. You got to, we're doing a shoot tomorrow that's all about making the product look super hot.
Mm.
And then last week I was sheep shearing and learning how to shear a sheep in Somerset. So it's a balance.
Maybe next time you can just do both together. Do a photo shoot on a sheep, and they kind of combine both journeys
Yeah.
to
Well,
to
well,
to to maximize your time.
yeah,
Um, and this really leads to my final question, really from my side, and this is really more on you as a founder, as an entrepreneur, because I think there's this. I think there's almost a stigma, at least in the technology startup industry, but I think it even goes beyond that, where there's sort of like this young entrepreneurs are always being treated as, oh, there's the next brainchild coming out, and they're disruptive and the new kid on the block. But actually, after a certain age, people don't have a chance anymore. But then once you look at the statistics, the most successful businesses are actually founded by entrepreneurs 30, 40, 50 years of age. It's actually not the very young person that comes out and says, hey, let me just disrupt the entire industry. And to a large extent, it goes back to experience and having actually seen a lot of things and leveraging this experience to then say, okay, let me now create a business based on all these learnings that I've had. Um, yeah, maybe you can just comment on that, because
yeah.
I think
It's good. It's a
yeah.
very good question, and it's something that I sort of get excited, but also worry a lot about concurrently, really. So look, I think the stats show that there's a guy that buys a bit of Neem product, who I really like, who has written a couple of books, and one of the conclusions he's made is that the best age to start a business is 46. Um, in terms of successful businesses. So there are lots of businesses that started by people in their 20s, and early 30s, but there are more successful businesses, percentage wise, started by people in their mid 40s. And there's no way I could have started this business when I was 31 or 30. And I tried with Black Ants, and I couldn't get it going. I didn't have the bravery, the power, the infrastructure, the network, the communication skills, the the knowledge of how to run, VAT returns, as well as design a product, as well as, source out all your Google ads. I just didn't have the capacity. Now, the flip side to that is, which I worry about, is if I walked into a room and did a pitch. I think you were doing a pitch yesterday. If I walked into a room and did a pitch, and I'd done a couple of pitches, not to raise yet, but for other reasons, um, and uh, I told them about my experience and what I'd done and what my plans were for the business, and then a very sexy, 29-year-old version of me walked in and said the same thing. I do think, unfortunately, still the money in the room might back the 29-year-old, because I think people see something in someone that they see in themselves. So, he reminds me of how I was when I was 29. Whereas if I'm closer to the guys with the money, they're like, well, what's he doing? Why is he starting up a business? Are you actually enjoying this? Shouldn't you be sort of, acting like your age rather than trying to, act like a 20-something entrepreneur? So I think there is still but again, look, I haven't raised, so I don't know this for certain, but I still think there is an interest in youth and energy and passion. But my sense is that I just couldn't have done this when I was younger. I've got the experience, the knowledge, and the ability to deal with stress and resilience. Really, that power just to keep on going and not give up, which is probably rule number one of entrepreneurs, isn't it? It's just sort of keep going. I love that sort of Henry Moore quote. That when he was 20, he was one of 100 pretty good sculptures, and when he was 30, he was one of 50 very good sculptures, and then when he was in his 50s, he was like the only sculpture left. So therefore, he was the best because everyone else had given up along the way, whereas he just kept going at it.
No, I think it's super motivational, and I mean it's funny because in the tech industry I'm also not considered a young entrepreneur anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not. I look young, but it's it's due
How old
to
are you?
therapy.
How old are
I'm
you?
32.
Yeah, okay. So and in tech, you think it's sort of
In
like
tech, I'm not.
24-year-olds, is it?
No. 32 is already. I think once you cross the 35 mark, it's like, oh, you're
You don't know
dinosaur in
what's
tech.
going on anymore. Yeah. You're
It
no
makes me very
longer in
sad.
touch.
But
Interesting.
yeah, I think there clearly is a stigma on the fundraising side, but I think also in just popular opinion and media, and as you said, it's this the young person coming in disrupting, but actually I think the experience matters so much, and especially if you think about a business like Neem, where you go to such a granular level of how do you really design the operation from scratch, where you just need a lot of knowledge and a lot of background, and you need to see a lot of things. And I think when there's some young entrepreneurs or designers coming out saying, okay, which is incredible, say, hey, I want to start a sustainable brand, but for them to wrap their head around what does sustainability actually mean, I think it's like on a truly operational level, rather than just saying, hey, we can track and trace, but they've never actually been to a factory before. They haven't really seen how things work on the ground. It's obviously super hard. So also here, what an inspirational journey. And yeah, when you first told me about that, and really your journey from all these like really incredible brands that you've had building up, and then going out and saying, okay, now I'm at the right point to actually start something on my own, I think is incredible.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's certainly it's good when the sales fly in,
Yes.
and then when they don't fly in February, you've just got a plan for later on in the year. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, really excited. I mean, we're also going to plan some more stuff together with you. So
Wicked.
I'm really excited about that. And yeah, it's so nice meeting you. And thank you for being on that on our podcast.
Wicked. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye bye.